Namaskaram, everybody. I welcome you all to Damaru, and I'm very excited as we come to one another session of our annual yoga festival, Bilva 2022. I am Mauli, founder and executive director of Damaru Yoga and Sound Therapy Studio. As you know, every year Damaru celebrates Bilva throughout the month of July, and we choose different themes mainly related to the Indian yogic traditions and the knowledge systems. And we invite scholars from across the globe to share their knowledge with us. Last year, Bilva's theme was cultural appropriation of yoga and the necessity to embrace the inherent Indianness in the yogic traditions. This year, the theme of Bilva Festival is something very close to my heart because we are celebrating the great teacher Sri T Krishnamacharya and his holistic teachings in the KYM tradition as taught by his lifetime student and son Sri T.K.V. Desikachar Sir. And also, there is a reason behind choosing this theme, and I feel extremely happy to share with you all that Damaru is announcing its in-depth first teacher training program this coming September 2022, in collaboration with KYM. So this is a very in-depth training for aspiring yoga teachers, and towards the end of this session, we will share a little more of details and a short video for those of you who want to know more details about this program. So now coming to T. Krishnamacharya and Sri Desikachar Sir, T. Krishnamacharya was known as the father of modern yoga. Not only did he teach yoga, he was also a Vedic scholar, a Sanskritist, a composer of various Sanskrit texts related to yoga and health. Some of his books, I would say, would be Yoga Makaranda, Yoga Rahasya, Yoga Valli, Yogasanagalu. And following his footsteps, his son, Sri T.K.V. Desikachar, a very, very kind, compassionate human being, a very beautiful teacher, but a thorough observer. And as a therapist, they would say that he would observe the slightest of the uh, expressions of whoever he meets, and he could give very creative and specific ways for people to come back and thrive into wellness. So, before we get into our topic of today, and uh, before I introduce you all to today's speaker, let me also tell you briefly about this yoga festival Bilva and how it is conducted under the wing of Damaru Foundation. Damaru Foundation is a public charitable trust founded with the aim to promote and implement the traditional yogic sciences and increase awareness about wellness and harmony in that segment of the society where they are in dire need of help for the holistic wellness but may not be able to afford it. So, if you wish to support our efforts towards their wellness, consider contributing to the Damaru Foundation. You can find the link to the payment options in the description box below, and your contributions will help us support more such people and at the same time bring more of such valuable content and scholarly speakers from across the globe to share their knowledge with us. So, today I invite Ms. Gillian Lloyd to speak with us. A very warm welcome, Jill. Namaskaram.
Thank you.
So, before we hand over the session to our expert speaker today, let me briefly introduce Jill to all of you. Jill is from London, UK, and her first introduction to the teaching of T. Krishnamacharya and Sri T.K.V. Desikachar was in 1976. She was back then a trainee teacher in the British Wheel of Yoga, and they had a day with a visiting teacher and a week with Sri T.K.V. Desikachar. That's where they met first in the UK, and that's where she was also exposed to the concept of vinyasa krama, that steps that are taken towards one's goal. This resonated with her immediately and sparked an interest in his teachings that lasts even till date. They met back then in UK in 1976, but it was much, much later when she actually came to India and was taken under the wing of Sir. But before this happened, over the period of years, she spent learning with two teachers there in UK who had learned with Desikachar Sir, Martin Underwood and Ian Rawlinson. He's the author of Yoga for the West. And later, she did from 1979 to 1981. She learned from Paul Harvey, and they set up the AYS, the Association of Yoga Studies. She did a 4-year teacher training program and then a 2-year postgraduate program with Paul. And it was in this context that she first came to India, met Desikachar Sir, and started studying at KYM. Consequently, she started taking up her own students to study, come to India, and gradually started meeting Sir more and more until she was taken under his guidance. So that's the journey that Gill had with Sri T.K.V. Desikachar. And with that, Jill, I would just welcome you with one question, that how has your relationship with Mr. T.K.V. Desikachar as a teacher impacted your personal life?
Thank you. Thank you, Mauli. Well, I'd just like to start, if I may, with just chanting to Krishnmacharya and his father, Krishnmacharya and Desikachar, which we do at the beginning of any meetings that we have in the UK and gatherings. So I would like to start with that to really honour them both and their teachings and the impact, and then I will say about the impact on my personal life. Okay, so I'd just like to start with this. Sri Krishna Vagishayatishvara Pyam Samprapta Chakrankana Vashisaram Sri Notnarangendra Yathau Samapita Swam Sri Krishnamaryam Gurvayamide Virodhe 𝐾𝐚𝐸𝐬𝐵 Shatatara Krithodayam Yogacharyam Krishnamaryam Guruvaryamaham Bhaje Krishna Suhridaya Patram Jnana Vairagya Pushanam Srimad Venkatanathar Yam Vandeham Yoga Deshikam Shri Guru Pyo Namaha. Thank you very much, Mauli, for your introduction. I didn't actually meet Desikachar back in 76. It was a teacher who'd been with him that inspired me. So I must say, didn't actually meet him till 1992. So I had a long period of studying in this tradition before actually meeting, and probably would like to say something about that first encounter at some time. The wonderful thing in I could say in my training, of all the people that I worked with, the people who'd been out in 1972 and then in the 80s, and all the people there that I'd worked with all sang from the same song sheet, as it were. and they it was so obvious that there was someone very special behind all these people's teaching, that you knew that there was something amazing there that could bring this coherence to yoga teaching to the West. Okay, so it's a very interesting question you've asked me about yoga in my personal life, because when I started yoga, I had young children, and now I'm a grandmother of grown-up girls. So my life has changed, all during this period. But I've only ever had a lot of support in my own life, and my husband has been very, very supportive and come to my yoga classes and organized trips to India and so on. And he was very much involved, and he got on very well. My husband got on very well with Desikachar. They were very seemed to be quite fond of one another, which was a joy. But it also brought so much richness into my life, because I've had so many teachers from the KYM stay at my house, including Desikachar. Desikachar in 2010 stayed with us, and I've had Menaka, his wife, stay with me for a week, and many people over the years have been and stayed with me when they've been teaching here. So it's always felt that my personal life and my yoga is sort of very intertwined, and been there. It's always been. I've always felt very supported, and by my children as well. That they're not so. I don't think my children are very much more interested in sports and things, but weren't so drawn to yoga themselves. But they've always supported me. And it was my great delight when Desikachar came to England to give some talks in London, that my daughter came and met him. And that was, a delightful occasion. That was wonderful. So I would say that of all the different stages that I've been with young children, being at home, then starting teacher training, then becoming a yoga teacher, really linked mostly to this tradition right the way through, but it got deeper and deeper into the tradition. I can only say that I feel it feels quite natural and harmonious in my house. And I just add to that, when 2010 was the last time I think Desikachar left India, and he came to the UK to do some workshops with lots of teachers from all over the world coming as well. And he stayed in my house for 4 days at that point. He wasn't terribly well. He was he was good, but he was a bit shaky. And he stayed with us. So we had the privilege of looking after him then. And I've said to my yoga students, when they come, I've got a small studio, and I said, Desikachar has practiced in this room, it's chanted in this room, and so on. And the one message I've had back from my students was, well, that means you can never leave your house. You must stay there all the time. You cannot move. So it's been very integrated, I would say, into my life, right the way through. I've been able to practice, study, and teach yoga, so I didn't need to be doing something else. I wasn't pursuing my earlier career as a civil servant. It just from my children being babies, I was in the yoga world, and that's sort of 50 years now. So it's quite a long time.
But that's fascinating. You're into civil services. Awesome. But then that transition to yoga. So, as a yoga practitioner, So then when you started learning, were you always, did you always learn from this tradition, or were you in some other school of practice and then you found something that resonated or something unique about this tradition and the transition
Yes,
to
yeah,
KYM?
yeah. Okay, yes, good question. I started going to yoga classes. I'd heard about it. It was not well established in the UK at that time. It was just beginning to the classes, and they used to have what we would call an evening institute, which was classes for adults to go back to a school, college, and learn various subjects. And I decided that on this particular year that I would go back and improve my French. So I went to enroll on this French course, and the teachers were all sat in a room. You just went up and signed up with them. But the French class was full. And the lady sitting next to her was a yoga teacher. And so I thought, well, I've heard of yoga. Perhaps I'll do that instead. So I signed up for this class. The teacher wasn't from this tradition. And I went along. And I must say that very first class, she was so generous and so open about the big view of yoga beyond asana that I knew she changed my life forever on that evening. So I'd only been going a little while, and I'd read the Bhagavad Gita, and I was reading a bit of the Upanishads. So I was interested, in the history, the philosophy, and it was when she wanted me to train to be a teacher, and it was when I was training to be a teacher that I met the teachings of Desikachar. And it's like you said in the beginning, what was so important at that time was this concept of vinyasa krama. Nobody was doing anything like that before. It was more of a hodgepodge, a sort of do this one, but without any rationale really behind what was going on. And all of a sudden it made sense. And then, of course, you've got I started working with these other teachers, and I learned about breath in asana, breath longer than movement, directional breathing. All these things didn't occur anywhere else at that time, and probably still not now. And counterpose. And a lot of things that Sir brought in things like counterpose are accepted now, but it was Sir who brought them into the UK, these concepts. And we, hopefully those of us who were involved in following his teachings, however we could at that time, were able to spread that. And so when I became a teacher trainer for the British Wheel of Yoga, when I had my first group in 1985, I said to them, you'll be getting a British Wheel of Yoga certificate, but I am in the tradition of T.K.V, Desikachar and Krishnmacharya, and that's how I will approach the training with these ideas. So I was informally passing this on at that time. I did say, if anybody has a good reason to do something else and can give me a good rationale for what they're doing, that's fine, because everyone has to find their own path. But that never happened. And a lot of the people that I taught then are still with me now, and have been to India with me and have met Desikachar and so on. So it was a very slow growing process, really. But one thing I'd like to do is, after all this time of studying and then being with Paul Harvey, who'd gone out, and all the training I did with Paul, which was brilliant, absolutely brilliant. 4 years teacher training, and then 2 years postgraduate course with him. But it was Paul that brought Desikachar over when I first met him. And I'd just like to say something about, so it was 92, it was Easter 92, about April, springtime. And we had the very most beautiful manor house in the south of England, a really beautiful venue with farmland all around, beautiful. And I'd never met him. We were all people who'd studied with Paul. And I was absolutely terrified of meeting him. I can't tell you, because if you can imagine, I've been all these years sort of following his teaching, and I thought, what would I feel if he wasn't what I thought? You know, my expectations were they too much, and so on. We had a week with him. He was absolutely who I thought he was, from his teaching and the way he was, and his he was very warm and friendly, but also kept himself very private. You know, he would spend a lot of time. He wasn't chatty. He wouldn't have a coffee with you or have lunch with you then. It was very much that he was teaching, but he was everything that I thought. And the other thing that happened then that confirmed for me, he picked me out to, he'd asked for us all, there were about 50 of us, to do a practice, right? Do a vinyasa krama for Mahamudra. So we all had to draft them out, and then he looked at them all, and he picked out mine to show to everybody else. Now, I mean, A1, I was amazed, but it also, but what that signified, apart from an ego boost, which is not what it's about, but what it made me feel that I was on the right track. I had understood the principles, and he was always supportive of my work in that way as we went on. So that was a very, very crucial, critical moment of my studying his work, as it were. And then Paul was taken, we then started going to India. And at one time I was, not long after, I suppose, I was appointed in India as chair of AYS years and years ago. And it hadn't had a chairman, but Desikachar thought we needed to be a little bit more organised. And he liked me working with Paul. And so that was lovely, because I was appointed and garlanded by Sir and welcomed. And so even when I wasn't his one-to-one student, Sir always saw me when I was in India. So he was giving me practices, seeing me, talking to me, and so on. So that was very lucky. But I'd also, when I was with Paul, we had to do a thesis on for something for our postgraduate certificate. And I was always interested in the history of yoga. I was always interested in reading Veda, Upanishads, and so on, Bhagavad Gita, Katiyaka Padipaka, and so on. I did a paper on the history of yoga when I was with Paul, and it really helped me to deepen my understanding of yoga, you know, through history, through practice. And I suppose the one thing that's really helped me particularly would be Vedic chanting. From Sir, from Radha Sundararajan when she was alive and at the KYM, and from Menaka. I think it was the chanting and the Vedic chanting and the rigors of it, the strictness of it, the pronunciation, the detail, was the one thing that I found was the best thing for me for keeping the mind quiet and not wandering. You know, the mind is, what Desikachar would say, sort of the manas mind's a monkey mind. And it sort of helped to sort of keep the monkeys a bit quieter. So I'm very, and Juna, it's interesting. You know, we talked about the stages of life, and we're starting off younger and doing all the asana and enjoying all that. But things change. Pranayama becomes more important, you know, as you come to these different stages. And I think chanting is amazing. Once, years ago, many years ago, and it's when I first met Barbara Bryan, who couldn't join us today, Desikachar did a chanting weekend in London, and he was asking questions, and he said to me, Gillian Lloyd, please stand up and tell everyone why Vedic chanting is so important. It's really scary. And so I stood up and said, well, you know, when you're chanting, it's good for the mind, focusing the mind, and the vibrations of the chants have an amazing effect on the body, depending what you're chanting. Said things like this even, yes, he said, but that's not the main thing. And he said, the main thing is it's the one thing we do together, Sangha. When we chant, we don't do asana, we're on even in a group, we're doing it on our own. And, you know, it has to be right for our individual bodies, etc. And he, I was really glad he said that, because that thought that Sangha is so important, as well as one's own inner journey, is interesting and
very,
beautiful.
very beautiful.
Yeah,
Very
it was
beautiful.
very beautiful. And I should tell you a story then. I was sitting, he asked me, it was years ago, I'm not a good chanter now, but I was much more a beginner. And he asked me to do a chant, Lagunyasa, at the front of this group. There were hundreds of people. And he said, Gill, you come up and lead this chant. I was terrified, absolutely terrified. And I was sat next to him, and I was on a chair with arms at the side. And I had to brace my arms against the chair to stop my hands shaking. I was so nervous. And then I looked at the people in front of me, and I looked down, and they were nervous, and they were looking at their books. They weren't looking at me. And it was so good. It relaxed me, and it was okay. But I had some very good experiences with Desikachar.
Probably he could sense that nervousness. That's why he pulled you out.
Oh, yeah, yes, it was a challenge. It was a challenge. Yeah.
Thank you
But
for
can I
sharing
also
what you
say, you
do.
talked about my personal, and it helped me in my personal life. I can't think what the year is, about 2005. I had a heart attack, and so obviously that wasn't a very good thing. I survived, obviously, and it wasn't a major one. I didn't need stents or anything. But he was so kind to me, and his teaching of me then, he came over to England some months later, and it was really seeing his skill in action then. You know, he wasn't asking me to do movement or anything. He'd just get me to lie down, and he'd chant to me, just to let those vibrations act in a healing way. So, you know, through those experiences, you see, so, you know, his skills. and just his amazing teaching. If I can go on, I might be changing course, I'm not sure, but the one thing he did with me whenever I was in India, if he was seeing a one-to-one person and I was around, he'd come and ask me to sit in with him. So I saw him, you know, actually working with someone. And if the timing's okay, I'd just like to give an example of what happened.
We would love to. Yes.
Yeah. So
Yes, please.
we were not in the KYM as it is now. It was in an old building, and they had these little huts outside, little simple little units. And he asked me to come and join him, and it was a mother and father bringing their young son, who was about 8 or 9. They were very, very worried about this boy because they thought he wasn't doing well enough at school to be able to proceed well. And he was very, very jumpy, very highly active. You know, he was moving all the time, fiddling around, very disturbed child, looked sort of agitated. So the parents brought him into this room, and I was sitting there. And Desikachar asked the parents a few questions and spoke to the boy very beautifully. And what he did, this, I can't exaggerate how agitated this boy was. And Desikachar picked up his own pen, and it was a pen with a retracting nib like this. And he gave it to this boy and gave him a picture of a human body and a piece of paper, and he asked him to copy it. So this boy, first of all, couldn't get the nib down. He didn't know. And the parents tried to interfere, and he said, no, he must do it. And eventually he got it. And then he sat and meticulously copied this picture that Sir had given him. And by the end of doing it, this boy became peaceful. It was absolutely, you know, within 10 minutes, he'd gone from this really difficult space, you know, and young boys can be quite a handful anyway, to this calm being with the biggest smile on his face. And he left the room really happy, this boy, and smiling at Sir. So that was the most beautiful thing to see.
It's almost magical.
It was magic. It felt like magic, and he could do that, I think, for a lot of people. But to be in that presence of seeing it, and I saw the boy come when I was sitting in the foyer, come for his next appointment, and he ran into the room. He was, you know, he was happy to be with Sir. Wow. But it was really beautiful. Yeah, but the other thing, and stop me if I'm going also on a tangent, but he could also be very strict with people. He was, you know, he wasn't always easy. He was very firm and could be very strict. And just another instance at KYM, there was this guy who'd been studying, was doing a PhD in England at university and studying Indian texts and yoga. And I'd seen him before, this young man. And he was, Desikachar asked me, he said, this chap is coming. I'm going to interview, he's going to interview tonight about 6 o'clock. Would you please come and be with me? So I went along. The chairs were put outside in the garden at 6 o'clock. Now, you know, 6 o'clock's already dark, and there were it was quite mosquito-y out there, so it was not comfortable. He put 3 white plastic chairs out for the 3 of us. Then this young man came along, and this is the point of me telling you this. This young man came, he'd already seen Mr. Iyengar and Patabi Joyce, this young man, and he came in and he immediately prostrated right down on the floor to Desikachar, right down flat. Desikachar jumped up, got him under his shoulders and picked him up, saying, "I am not a guru. I am not a guru." And his voice got lighter and lighter as he came. And then he said, "I am not a guru," and very gently put him in the chair. It was really interesting. He would want, that would happen, that people would prostrate, but usually Indians, who it was part of the norm. But he was very uncomfortable at that stage with people doing that to him. He didn't feel it was appropriate for Westerners then, but he was very firm. But it was just wonderful to see how he did it, and how he was firm, but then extremely gentle. And then and the discussion went on. So that was
That's also showing a lot of humility from his side.
absolutely, yeah, it did. He was very, very human. I think that's the other thing. You asked me about yoga in my family life, and for me, but one of the attractions of Desikachar was that it is a family tradition and not a guru-led tradition, not an orange robe, not a swami, with the swami in the lead. And that to me meant a lot, because there's Desikachar with a son that had problems, the older son, and the other two. He lived a family life, and therefore could identify with the needs of
Absolutely.
yeah. He told me, he had a typical discussion with his daughter about she wanted a television in her bedroom. She was a teenager, many years ago. And he had obviously said no. He was being the strict father. No, 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 no. And then he said to us all in a gathering once, he said, "I've been thinking about my daughter. I should let her have a television." He said, "I don't think I'm being very wise here." So it was, all the sort of normal family things that happen. And so, it's someone who's a swami, they're leading a very different life and don't have the same problems, whereas Desikachar and Krishnamacharya had these issues in their lives as well. So I am very grateful that it's a family tradition.
So they could relate more to other people around.
Absolutely, yes. That
His daughter is also a
relatability.
beautiful human being. We just had a session with her on Bilva Mekala, and it was absolute privilege to talk to her as well.
Oh,
Such
how
a, again,
wonderful!
so much of humility, so much of kindness. It was beautiful talking, interacting with her.
Yeah, she's a wonderful person in her own right. She's amazing. I haven't seen her for years, but I think I last saw her in England. And being in America now, her being in America, it's I have lost contact, but a very lovely person, just amazing, quite like her father, really.
Yes.
So there is something that's quite like her father. She's quite quiet and but very knowledgeable. So
So, Jill, what you shared was so precious, I feel, because that whole, even those little instances give so much of learning. While we feel we just sharing our anecdotes or experiences, in each of those sharings, there was so much of learning. So, really grateful for that sharing. And I had goosebumps when you started off. You went for a French class, instead signed up for a yoga class. It's literally like destiny picking you, or like the universe conspiring you and pulling you into this. It's amazing. So,
It is,
wow.
it is up, yeah, yeah, it was amazing. And I'm really sort of grateful that my life has been a yoga journey. Um, and I have a great love for India, and it's and I'm still in contact a lot with the guy who used to run me around in his rickshaw in Chennai. I
Wow.
see even here that. So very, obviously for all of us, it's been a very difficult time, hasn't it? With COVID, a lot of loss, a lot of disruption. I just hope we can come back. I've taken lots and lots of groups out to the KYM for study, and now one of my colleagues, Andy Curtis Payne, is doing that. So we hope that's going to start again next year. We feel the links, and I'm now feeling that if I come to India again, I'm going to have to come to Gujarat.
Wow. You're most welcome.
Yeah,
It's a beautiful place. Do
it's so real and authentic and honest, and Desikachar's teaching so human, and Krishnamacharya is about being a human being, and
true.
learning to understand the Yoga Sutra in such a wonderful way, but the way he brings that all to life, and the studies. And just one thing I think also that he's done are the models that he's extrapolated in Krishnamacharya from the text, like the Panchamaya and the Panchaprana, all those. And I think the Panchamaya, that of using that when you're teaching one-to-one, is one of the most significant helps when you're working with someone and working out, where the issues are. So I'm be really grateful. The one thing I think I probably got Desikachar as my personal teacher, as he was not so strict as he got older as perhaps when he was younger. I might have got the easy run, I don't know. But when I should say, when I started working with him one-to-one, at first I was very scared because I knew he was very strict, and I thought it would be not easy. But my personal experiences, that when I went into his room and he might say, lie down on the cot thing, and or whatever, or do this, do that, I never felt so peaceful as I did in that time with him in that room, of just a wonderful, deep sense of inner peace. A, a, he was such to me, a beautiful soul. I've seen him angry, I've seen him cross, I've seen him cry. But in that situation, just that the art of yoga, really, his heart, he had just such a generous heart. And yes, just amazing. Just amazing. So I feel very grateful, and yes, very grateful to have met him. And I think my husband feels the same. We both have a great fondness as well.
For him.
It's deep respect. I mean, he was always the teacher. You weren't ever chums. And that's what I admired, that sort of dignity. Um, yeah,
So,
I last
before
saw
you
him.
actually met him in person, for many years you had learned with Paul, and I haven't met him, but I've heard a lot about Paul being a wonderful teacher. So, when that transition happened, so this was the first time you were learning from an Indian teacher. Was that a conflicting thing, or some different, or the
I
way of
had met
teaching Paul would do?
I had met some Indian teachers through the British Wheel of Yoga before, but Paul I knew before. I'd known him through yoga. He was an Iyengar type teacher when I first met Paul. And it was when Paul knew I was interested in Desikachar. So when he went out to India, he connected with me and we took that further. And his training was amazing. But you know that it wasn't that Paul was my teacher, a soul teacher, although we were very close. And I have great admiration for Paul. I think it was for me a way of connecting with Desikachar as well, to get the teaching, to receive the teachings. But Paul did an amazing task and was very generous in taking me out to India a lot, so that connection became. We worked very closely together, Paul and I, and I've been out to India with him, you know, on my own with him. So he's, and one thing I'd say about Paul, his generosity. If I go on my bookshelves, if I pick up so many of the books on the shelf, it says to Gill with love for your studies. You know, I've got so many. You know, he was very generous, very, very generous. And I, in fact, just to impress that generosity of Paul, on my fireplace at home, I have a big Nandi bull, a metal, you know, cast iron one, big bronze one, really big. And when Desikachar was in England, we were in the Bharata Vidya Bhavan in London, and this Nandi bull was in a case there. And I said to Desikachar, I was walking through with Desikachar and said, look, sir, there's a Nandi bull. That comes, you know, it's like the one in your hometown of Mysore. And he said, I'll buy it for Paul. So he bought it for Paul. And then I thought, well, I would have really quite liked, and I looked around in India, and Paul kept saying, no, don't like that one. And when I got back, Paul turned up at my house with this Nandi bull, and he'd asked Desikachar if he could give it to me. So it felt like a nice link between the three of us.
Yeah. That means there's some deep connection where all three of you are, you know, it's a full circle that you came about.
I know it's a silly thing to say, but it, you know, it is Sangha, isn't it? It's that interconnectivity, you know, of hearts, and you know, and it's very touching when that happens. You know, so that was, I felt really honoured, really honoured. So all I've got for all of my teachers, and Paul especially, and then obviously particularly Desikachar. You know, I've got my, you know, I'm really so grateful, just immense gratitude. And you know, you hope that you do them justice. We're just coming up to the point in August when Desikachar passed away, and that's going always is a really sad time. And I'm sure, like, you know, you think he probably wouldn't want anybody to make too much fuss, Desikachar, about anything. But in many ways, having seen him so really ill, I mean, it really was not easy. When I last saw him, he was beyond normal communication. That was on his 75th birthday. And I decided then I wouldn't go to see him again because I didn't want to disturb him, because it was too much. And so some relief that he was released, you know, after that. But it's always a very sad time. A really sad
Well, like
time.
you said, the energies of this Sangha, even as he passed on, we still carry on those energies of togetherness
Yeah,
of that community. I think you
yeah,
still run some study groups and all that happens even now, right?
yes, yeah. I have a Vedic chant group, and I have another group that we do at sort of studies of text or yoga teachings, how they're represented in the text, like the
So,
Panchamaya and
Jill, when you
Panchaprana.
learned, like you said, since very early on, you were very much interested into the Bhagavad Gita and a lot of other texts. Was it difficult for you in terms of learning those texts and not having a Sanskrit background or something? Was it okay?
No, no. Oh, I don't know what is that yours or mine? I don't know. I don't. That's very interesting. I think I was very recommended good translations. I had obviously Desikachar's Yoga Sutra. Um, I took advice as what were regarded as good translations. Paul was very helpful with that. So I there are some, yeah, Yoga Sutra I would stay with Desikachar. I use Dr. Radhakrishnan for some other texts, but yeah, I'm not a Sanskritist. And in some ways, I'm sorry that I haven't learned the written language. But I think it would have been a bit of a sideline. It would have taken. I always felt it was going to take me away if I spent all this time trying to learn the language, because from what happens from what I see with Western academics writing or translating these ancient books, and they argue with one another. The academics dispute things, and I'm very happy with what Desikachar's taught me. He's been through the Taittiriya Upanishad with me, word by word, and I'm very, I completely trust him, and I don't think, knowing Sanskrit per se, I know obviously quite a lot of words now, but it's the Devanagari is probably was the obstacle.
Yeah, but even the chanting or the sound of the language also changes you, transforms you at certain level, even when we may not be able to know
Absolutely,
the meaning or write about it. And
yeah,
one thing that I just it just popped up, that that faith in the teacher, that shraddha that you hold whenever you're learning such texts, that in itself creates a ground for the knowledge to unfold. You then don't need too many translations, but that faith with
yeah.
which you do it, the knowledge just unfolds to you. So
And just if we take Yoga Sutra as the key text, um, I sat with Desikachar, him going through and explaining how he came, because it's not a word by word translation. It's it's putting it into a paragraph in English, and he he would go through all the Sanskrit and say what the words were in Sanskrit. So I obviously recognize a lot of the words, but he would say how he came and why he'd said what he'd said. So it you know it, Desikachar was just so straightforward and clear. There was no pretense, no. Um, it just you felt that you were getting to the heart of the matter.
yeah,
And you're not we wasn't being a lot often academics try and be quite clever with what they're doing, but this was real. It's not, he didn't treat it academically. It's heart to heart teaching from it that he gave you, which is different from learning something at a university.
I'm sure it's very
um
different. It becomes a very
Very,
experiential
very different.
learning. Yeah.
Yeah, yes, absolutely.
So
But
Jill,
it's been a long journey.
it's been a long journey and it has been a amazing one. But so you've been teaching so many years of your life. And like you said, the 4 years of teacher training and then the 2 years of postgraduate diploma. It's a journey of so many years, and then till now we all are learning. Versus, it's almost sad to see how popularly we can see people becoming teachers in 20 days and 30 days and 60 days. So it's also about how we offer these trainings rather than blaming the teachers or the students. But anything that you would want to say to aspiring yoga teachers, or the students who would gradually want to get into teaching, some message for them from you?
Yeah. That asana for people coming into yoga is just really a beginning step. It's a step on the way, and the art of it and the subtlety of it needs to be understood and learnt. But yoga's for life, and yoga deals with so much more than that. That is just a starting point. And for really understanding yoga, it needs to be explored deeply, in whatever avenues, exploring pranayama, exploring the use of the breath. I mean, people aren't even taught to breathe properly, often in some of these modern courses, that they're missing out on a great wealth of support for their lives by not going further. And I was just so lucky that my teacher was giving me the Bhagavad Gita. I mean, 6 months I'd read the Bhagavad Gita, knew about that. I'd read some simple Upanishads and then went on to the Yoga Sutra. I was just so lucky. That doesn't happen in normal classes these days. But I've also got a feeling that not everybody wants to go down that path of learning more, but a lot of people do. So we don't want to lose people who could really come through and be really good, have good knowledge and be able to pass more on. So we do need to encourage people that there is far more to it than just being able to do the splits or, stand on your head or whatever. And the first step is really to teach the link between the breath and the body. That's a good starting point, isn't it? To realize that you're working on the complete body right the way through, not just not just posing. There is an awful, in the West now, it's become like a fashion industry thing about what you wear and so on. I think if we can help people, they might take the step in go in that door, but for them to realize that they're going into a room with a lot of other doors that will lead them further on, and that can give them a lot of joy. Perhaps, it's not that chanting's going to be for everyone or whatever, but I think really to understand the depth of yoga and the layers, and that it works on the whole of the Panchamaya.
So that's a very positive and hopeful note on which you actually summarize the whole thing. That yes, they may step up from wherever, but just to know that there are so many other doors to open yet.
Yes, it's somehow
Amazing.
you've got to put things in, and I feel quite glad. It's really hard. I'm really heartened by to see that people, who'd come to do teacher training with me, who hadn't expected to be following me into Desikachar's teaching, in fact, have done so and done teacher training in this tradition. So that, it's Desikachar used to say, there's one interview he did, and he says, when you meet a teacher and you think they're going to, they might, he said, you've got to keep both fingers crossed. But when you think this teacher is okay, better keep your fingers crossed, the up one hand at least, with your fingers crossed behind your back. So, you know, people have to look around. And if their heart gets touched, perhaps they'll open and go and look further. I mean, my daughter went to a yoga class where she lives not long ago. And this is what can happen here. The girl taught with headphones and a microphone on, with music, modern music playing, so all the time pop music, and she did everything with the group, which Desikachar would have just teach you. He wouldn't be doing everything with the group. So she's lying down, standing up, upside down, and everything with the group. And halfway through the class, this teacher said, if anybody's got anything wrong with them, that you should let me know, in the middle of a posture.
Oh, God.
I mean, that's how bad it can get here.
Yeah.
My daughter
It's
said she
a
didn't.
global problem. It's all over, all around, even here.
Yeah, it is shocking, isn't it? And but so I think somehow we need to write and talk with people, encourage people. I would say this tradition, when I look at all the people who studied with Sir, well before me, but all the guys who went out and spent 2 years studying with him one-to-one, they were all very, very bright guys, and women. And, you know, I don't know many of the women, but I know quite a few of the men who did it. They're all very, very bright, intellectual boys. And perhaps we also have to be quite careful that as Desikachar could speak in a simple language to these people, to get them to feel something, to understand something, to help them to contact their breath, what their breath feels like inside their body, how the body moves as you breathe. Perhaps we can do some that, and then they can get them to have a good experience. But it's just getting to these people, isn't it? It's that you need to meet them. There needs to be that yoga come about that you meet and have a chance. So I'm sure yoga will prevail forever. You know, I think in its history, it's had a rise and fall. I think
And it's gradually
Krishnamacharya
coming
said when
back
he,
again.
it's because Krishnamacharya said when he was told to go leave his teacher at the end and to go and find a wife and have a family, but to teach yoga, that wasn't an aspirational thing at that time. That, you know, it was. He wasn't asked to go off and teach in universities all his knowledge or anything, but just to go back and start teaching yoga. So, you know, and he just did it. So, yeah, so different times, but it's, you know, it's being humble, isn't it? It's but we are very fortunate to have found such a wonderful tradition.
Definitely. For sure. That we can
You
cross
know,
our hearts and say so. Yeah.
absolutely, absolutely. It's I feel honoured to have done that, and the one thing Desikachar did for me, he gave me confidence when I probably was not confident, and he'd get me to do things I didn't think I could do, a bit like I told you about chanting. But one thing he did for me once that made me feel that I, you know, he was okay, you know, he sort of was happy to work with me, was on Saturday morning years ago. He, well before he was ill, he used to give Saturday, I don't know if you've heard about these Saturday morning lectures. It was in the old KYM, and it was upstairs with a straw roof, and everybody used to come at 8 o'clock, and it was a big, people sit around the circle with Desikachar at the end, and it might be some study or something, but he would have, he had this habit of asking people questions when they least expected it. And so on. But it was a big event every Saturday. And towards the end of his good health, so this is a bit later on, I was there. I'd been for a lesson with him, and I'd brought up a model of the 8 limbs of yoga to explain them, and it was all based on a bicycle wheel, and I'd drawn it all out and showed it to him. And so I went to his lecture the next day, and he said, Gillian Lloyd will lead this morning. She will show you her ideas on the end. And so there were about 100 people there. I had to stand up and show them what I designed and everything, and talk them through it. And I thought, I've never felt so honoured in my life, but I was terrified. But you know, I did feel that, you know, he I felt assured of a kindness from him. True. You know, because he had hundreds and hundreds of students. So yeah, I'm sorry you didn't meet him, but I'm sure you are meeting him all the time when you look at his Yoga Sutras and his teachings and his understanding of how the body works, you know, and the way he'd approach traditional ideas into modern times. Because in reality, the human condition has not changed. We still feel, don't we? We get angry, we get nervous, we get jealous, we get ill, all these things. We're no different to people who've lived thousands of years ago, in essence.
True that. You just said it's true, I could never meet him, but the series of sessions that I have been doing, I had not set out with this as an intention, but it's just sometimes I just get goosebumps. I feel as if I'm living with him through you all. As the speakers speak out their experiences and teachings, he just comes alive, and it's really very honoring and amazing experience. I don't know how to put that in words, but it's like reliving the whole thing through somebody else's lens, but it's beautiful. So
But
thank you for sharing your journeys with us.
It's a great pleasure, and I think, you know, you're obviously absorbing, you know, his teachings and being able to. I mean, it's an honor, and you know, and through listening to all these people, and you've had some obviously wonderful people to interview. You will see him in much more depth than you would have done before.
Yeah, in fact, sometimes as if I'm daydreaming, I will just tell myself. So after this, some of these sessions, it would just occur to me when somebody walks in for therapy, and I'm like, oh, what if Sir was there? What would he have done? And you know, I just kind of
exactly that. Lovely. That's beautiful. Yeah. Absolutely beautiful. And you know, I hope you know, you don't know how long you're going to live, but I'm certainly quite a long way along the path now. And you know, I just hope I've got the joy of sharing this, you know, as long as possible, really. And obviously wish you, so, you know, with your ventures and the training that's going on in your centre, I just think it's amazing. It's beautiful, and it's lovely to have another centre within India.
Thank you.
To share the teachings around India as well as around the world.
So I actually look forward to have you in Gujarat someday when you plan your India trip. So would you be okay to close the session with a small chant or a Shanti mantra or something of your choice?
Yes, I would.
Wow, thank you.
Do you know, I quite like to do, I know that, so I hadn't even thought about this, but just you asking me, is to do, it's a sort of, perhaps I could just close with the Shama Shlokaha and the Sattva Tyagaha, the closing, to apologize for mistakes that we've made in Sanskrit and so on, and and asking for sort of about our about whatever we do being in the right order, that we offer our actions to something higher. So would that be all right to finish with those two?
Thank you. That would be an honor.
Okay, I'll do that. Yadacharapada brashtam matrahinam tu yad bhavet tatsavam shanyatam deva narayana namostute Srimate Narayanaya Namo Namaha Kayena vacha manasendriyava buddhyatmanava prakrite swapavat karomi ajat sakalam parasmai narayanayeti samapayami Sarvam Shri Krishna Pannamastu. Thank you very much, Mauli.
Thank you, Jill. Thank you so much. Sarvam Shri
Lovely to be
Krishna
with you. God
Arpanamastu.
bless for all you do. Thank you. Goodbye.
Goodbye, Jill. Thank you. Namaste everyone, a very warm welcome. Today we are very excited to announce teacher training program at Damaru. This teacher training is happening at Damaru in collaboration with Krishnamacharya Yoga Mandiram. So I'm so happy to invite Ms. Nritya Jagannathan. She is the director of KYM Institute of Yoga Studies. And I just hand over to her because she's the best person to explain you what exactly we are getting into.
Shri Gurubhyo Namaha, Namaskaram. On this occasion of Damaru's anniversary, it gives me great joy to announce on behalf of the KYM the upcoming Yoga Teacher Training Certificate Program offered by the Krishnamacharya Yoga Mandiram in collaboration with Damaru Studios, Ahmedabad. This is the first time that this very intensive teacher training course comes to the western part of India at Ahmedabad. As many of you may be well aware, the Krishnamacharya Yoga Mandiram is a world-renowned center founded by Sri T.K.V. Desikachar in 1976 as a tribute to his father, teacher, and legendary yogi Sri Krishnamacharya. Founded as primarily a center for yoga therapy, over the years, the KYM also has acquired fairly solid reputation for its training programs, both in yoga studies as also healing chants, as these are fundamental even to the process of application of yoga tools. In this context, Krishnamacharya Yoga Mandiram and Damaru come together to offer you this 800-hour yoga teacher training program. 800 hours is inclusive of both the classroom and non-classroom hours, including personal study, project preparations, assignments, observation, internship, and so on. This program follows a syllabus that has been designed by the Academic Council of KY, following very closely the guidelines laid down by Sri T.K.V. Desikachar when he first conceived this program. The syllabus includes a very deep study of the classical techniques of asana, classical techniques of pranayama, the theory of asana, the fundamental theoretical principles of asana, modifications of asanas to suit people of different capabilities, theory and practice of dhyanam, apart from which there is also certain associated study such as the history and evolution of yoga, a deep study of the Yoga Sutra of Patanjali covering all 4 chapters of the text, an exposure to other yoga literature such as the Hatha Yoga Pradipika, the Bhagavad Gita, the Yoga Rahasya, and the Yoga Yajnavalkya Samhita. Apart from this, students will go through a study in certain allied subjects in every module of the training: fundamentals of anatomy and physiology, fundamentals of Ayurveda, and also an introduction to psychology. Apart from this, chanting of the Yoga Sutra will also be an integral part of the study modules. Now, this course requires, unlike many other short-term courses, is designed to run for a period of about 18 months in the hybrid mode. A big part of the learning will happen with teachers from the KYM teaching in person at Damaru Studio, Ahmedabad, with a portion of the subjects also being conducted online. Through the process of every module of training, there will be ongoing assessments, evaluations, discussions, and so on, culminating in a graduation where you will be certified. Those who graduate will be certified as yoga teachers in the tradition of the Krishnmacharya Yoga Mandiram. The Krishnmacharya Yoga Mandiram is one of the leading yoga institutes of India, recognized by the Yoga Certification Board under the Ministry of Ayush. And this level of training, this 800-hour teacher training course, will prepare students to be able to take the level 3 exam of the Yoga Certification Board. Also, this program is eligible to be recognized under the 500-hour advanced certificate program of the Indian Yoga Association as well. And with these words, I would like to invite those of you who are interested in a deep, serious study of yoga philosophy, yoga psychology, its practice, and its application from a very reputed tradition, one that is known the world over, to go through this process, which not only helps you to qualify yourself as a yoga teacher, as a teacher of yoga from a very reputed tradition, it can also offer much by way of reflective food for thought, offering a way to reflect on, to understand various life processes, to understand how the mind works, and through this understanding, to integrate the philosophy into our living, so to effect an overall transformation in our lives itself. And here I speak for so many hundreds of students, both Indian and international, who have gone through this training and who have benefited greatly from the value that this program can bring to you both professionally and personally. For further details, please do reach out to Mauli, who will be coordinating with us in running the course at Damaru. And with these words, I take your leave, and we look forward to having a very good registration for this program that the KYM is offering for the very first time at Ahmedabad. Thank you so much. Namaskar.
Thank you, ma'am. Gujarat welcomes the Krishnamacharya Yoga Mandiram. The privilege is ours. A very ancient parampara is coming to this part of India. And I urge all of you to take advantage of that to get into an in-depth exploration of the yogic studies. All our contact details are there in the description box. DAMARU, www.damaru.in is our website. Realm of Damaru is our handle on Facebook, Instagram, and you will get all the details. So do reach out and register, because another aspect of this tradition is that we do not take trainings or trainees in large numbers. So there's a very limited amount of seats that we are offering for this training so that we could get deeply involved. So get in touch and see you on the other side. Thank you.